What was the worst, most damaging way you took revenge? A neighbor who I never met accused me of trying to stab her dog through a double fence this winter. They have a wooden 6-foot stockade fence surrounded by a 4-foot chain link fence. The dog was injured on something in their backyard and required several stitches, which resulted in a large vet bill that they couldn't afford. They concocted the story that their animal-hating neighbor did this and began a fundraiser and raised quite a sum of money. Way more than the bill was. I had no idea about this whole drama until a friend in the police department told me of what this wacko was accusing me of. So once I found out, I requested a copy of the police report where the neighbor stated that the dog was hurt in their yard. There wasn't any blood or human footprints near the fence etc. And I posted it to the fundraising site. She lost friends and reputation for $400. Not exactly the worst revenge, but I think it's funny. My ex-mother-in-law was one of those a wife serves her husband and does everything kind of people. She always criticized me, my housework, the meals I cooked, etc. I decided to get even by filling a sock with the dust from my vacuum canister. Every day I'd stop by her house and take a moment to shake the sock around her house. It left dust everywhere. The floors were the easiest. Everyone's socks would get dirty from walking around. Her husband was noticing she wasn't doing her duty. The best was when I went and shook dust all over her couch pillows and returned that night. I made a show of flopping down on the couch from being so exhausted from work. Dust went everywhere. Her husband was like, "What the hell? Don't you ever vacuum?" This is my dad's story from when he was a kid. He was walking down the road one day when a bunch of kids in their late teens pulled up in a car and sprayed him with a fire extinguisher. He blew it off as a joke and thought it was pretty funny. 5 minutes later the same kids circle around and spray him a second time. This time my dad took note of the license plate number, make and model of the car and proceeded to track it down and find out where the kid lived. That night he went to the kid's house and threw a fire extinguisher through the car's windshield. When I was 11 there was a guy in the year above me that used to be a bully. He would stand over everyone and he was massive for a 12-year-old. One day after doing physical education class, I went to get changed into uniform in the changing room that was backed onto his classroom. Just my luck this douche happens to be in there. What are the odds? Anyway, a few words are exchanged before he shoves me really hard into all these school bags that were stored in there and leaves. When I dusted myself off, something caught my eye. It was his bag. His mum had written his name in big bold letters, so I thought FCK him and had a look, and to my great joy discovered the sickest Dragon Ball Z card collection. He was a rich kid as well as a bully and had them at school to show off. So yeah, I stole them and never looked back. After school I seen him crying like a bitch telling his mum that they are missing. Edit. Yes, my English isn't the best, I'm sorry. I screen capped photos from my wife's lover's Facebook and sent them to the school administration because he was a teacher and posting pics of your student's test then making fun of them is not cool at all. He was fired at the end of the year. Edit. After his dismissal, I divorced her and got her removed from her position at a daycare because it was a church-based facility with morality clauses for employment. All it took was a conversation with the pastor and she was phased out at the first available opportunity. I used to have a feral cat living behind my apartment building. It would always piss and tea on my car. It hated people and didn't want to be touched. Always running if you got to within 10 feet. Anyways, I got revenge on that bitch one day when I trapped her. Took her to the vet. Got her a checkup and paid for some minor surgery. Then I got her adopted. Last I heard she lived with a toddler that picked her up and carried her everywhere. FCK that cat. She got what she deserved. A buddy of mine insulted me, so I got him drunk. Took him down to the family catacombs. Chained him to a wall inside an alcove. And bricked up the front of the alcove. No regrets. So everyone has heard of the classic X-Lax and the brownies trick, right? Well, my buddy pulled that weak sauce on me about a week ago, so I pulled this little ditty on him to show him just how much more worse it can get. So there is this awesome weight loss drug called Olay. which works by turning off the enzymes that digest ingested fats, so instead of being absorbed through the gut they are instead passed right through the GI tract. Well, I took said buddy out to a truce dinner at the local Asian buffet. Pretty much fat covered fat in fat. And slipped him a dish mid-meal. The amount of raw sludge that has dripped, sloshed, and exploded out of that deserving asshole is more revenge than I could ever hope for. When I was first out on my own, I went to live temporarily with some friends while I settled in and got my own place. I put most of my belongings in the storage unit of their apartment. I went back a week or so after moving into my own place to get my things, and my buddy told me that the guys he knows downstairs from him had taken my bed set. I went down to confront them about it, and when they opened the door I could see straight into their apartment and into the bedroom, and there was my bed. They denied it and said their uncle gave it to them and shut the door in my face. I asked my buddy if he knew which car they owned, and he did. He pointed it out. I checked the doors. They were unlocked. I went into my car and grabbed the extra bottles of motor oil I had. And proceeded to coat the interior of their car in motor oil. The last bottle covered the driver's seat. Then I walked next door to the 7-Eleven. Bought a carton of milk. And poured it into the vents of the car. Went paintballing. One dickhead thought it would be hilarious to shoot me in the back of the leg to see if it worked. Obviously it hurt like f***ing crazy. Anyways. 2 rounds in and we get put on the same team. He's forgotten about it because he's done about 30 other dickhead things since then. He walks about 10 feet in front of me as we begin the round and says, "Is everyone ready?" So I shot him in the back of the leg and said, "Yeah, just gotta see if my gun is working." He turns around screaming at me, so ever so calmly I shoot him again. Judging by his reactions, I shot his left ball. Walked away. He went home. Victory. First job in retail. And I was really close with the rest of the team. Some newcomers were hired for the summer, which gave us some healthy competition. We were on commission. One girl kept stealing everyone else's sales, and when she was confronted she gave absolute no FCKS. And continued taking everyone's sales. Our schedule was always done on paper. And it is everyone's job to read their schedules properly for the following week. In the case you can't physically come into the store to write your schedule, you had to call and speak to a manager to read out your schedule over the phone. Anyways, she ends up calling and didn't ask for a manager to give her schedule. Gave her all the wrong shifts, which followed by termination due to job abandonment, missing work 3 shifts in a row. I worked in an office once, and the boss was a real prick. If you used any of your sick days, he would hold that against you at your yearly review. But if he was sick at all, or even just felt like it, he would stay home or go golfing. Well, there was a terrible flu going around. I was sick. A coworker was sick and throwing up in his trash bin. But none of us were allowed to leave. So when my boss went home super early, again, I went into his office and coughed and sneezed all over his mouse and keyboard. He got really sick a day later. In 6th grade, some kid made a snide remark in class about my name. And the whole class laughed. I saw him in the hallway carrying books the next day. So I kicked the back of his knee. The sound of teeth on linoleum still fills the spaces between my thoughts. I changed a battery for a guy I can't stand. So I didn't connect the auxiliary pack before I removed the battery from his car. So his clock and radio stations all got reset. Are you Canadian? I was playing follow the leader with my best friend in kindergarten. He was the leader and ran up the slide. We weren't supposed to run up the slide, but we were 5 years old and could make our own decisions. I followed him. But the teacher saw me and told me to sit down on the pavement until recess was over. So I told her that my friend went up it first and I just followed. The teacher called him over and asked if what I said was true. To which he said no. So then I told him we weren't friends until he said sorry. That showed him. He said sorry and then we played Tony Hawk on his N64 after school. Not worst but funniest. I dated a guy for 3 years and broke up with him when I found out he was married, whole other story. I basically did nothing when I found out other than stop speaking to him. About 6 months later I was thinking about it and wanted to send a little jab, so I logged into the student library site with his student card info and ordered a few dozen books on adultery to be delivered to his office, option available to grad students, which he shares with 2 colleagues. He's a computer science major, so the books were definitely not part of his studies. It was little but gave me a laugh. Wait. 3 years? Not me. But my brother has always been one of those evil geniuses thinking 10 steps ahead of everyone else. In kindergarten he went to a fancy private school and used to get picked on a lot for wearing glasses. The one time he actually fought back in self-defense. He got sent to the principal's office and lost recess privileges for a week. This was in January. He held on to that resentment all year. Fast forward to the last day of school. My brother consumes as many liquids as he possibly can. And then doesn't use the bathroom all day. In the last hour of the day, he sneaks into the principal's office and pees everywhere. We're talking all 4 walls, floor, and ceiling. Eventually, my brother gets caught. When the principal asked why he did it, he looks him straight in the eyes and says, "You pissed me off. So I pissed on you. And that's how you get expelled from private school." I once took a spider that bit me and put it into a hot pan and just watched it get carbonized. Spider, I love you. UCMS Terra Nova. I know. I was sitting in the library on the first day of fall semester trying to work, and a kid wearing Beats headphones was loudly rapping to his music. I politely asked him to stop, to which he called me a bitch or something, tried to make a scene, and got up and left. The thing was, he had forgotten to log off of his school's account, so I dropped him from all his classes. When I was 11 years old, I injured both my arms in a biking accident. My mom, being the skeptic that she is, didn't believe and waited 2-3 days before taking me to the hospital to get them looked at. Turns out my left humerus was completely broken and my right radius was fractured. Because she waited so long, my left arm is now slightly crooked from being set wrong. But it wasn't set bad enough to get rebroken and reset. I still haven't forgiven her. And for the next month after it happened, I would keep hiding her keys in different places in the morning and watch her get confused when she would look for them, wondering where she last put them. To this day she still doesn't know that I hid them. Needless to say, she was late to work a few times. TLDR, I broke my arms. Mum didn't believe me. I hid her keys for a month and made her late. I'm biking my dog around my neighborhood. Some guy almost runs me over with his SUV while laughing and turning onto his driveway. I have to jump off my bike to avoid him. I get really pissed off and start punching and kicking his car like a meth addict and a wall. He gets scared and stays inside his car. I walk to the back and pull out my pocket knife and put a huge gash along his back door with a huge grin on my face just to freak him out more. I go back to my bike with my dog waiting patiently because he's never seen me that mad, and we bike home together towards the sunset. I posted links to the bondage website my ex-girlfriend did a few shoots with to online reviews of the legit business she ended up working for after getting her life straight. Sounds pretty awful. Huh. I still wish I hadn't done it. But she had just tried to get me fired when she discovered I had moved on by telling completely fabricated stories. I mean, stories with no basis in truth. I have children. Trying to get me fired was evil. I texted after the posts with exactly this: telling lies to get people fired is lame. Dude. Truth works so much better. Link to her company's reviews. I really shouldn't have. But I was angry and it felt like self-defense at the time. April Fool's Day this year. I had several friends send fake texts to another friend, let's call him Steve, who lives in a different state. The texts were pretend responses to an imaginary ad offering free kittens. Steve somehow figures out it was me. He then goes to a popular classified site and posts 3 separate ads with my number attached. Free puppies. free kittens, and a free 42 flat screen TV. I start receiving a flood of calls, texts, and voicemails. I was contacted by well over 150 interested individuals in the first couple hours. I frantically tried to think of how I was going to get him back. And then it hit me. I responded to everyone by saying sure, it's still available. Come by anytime tonight after 5. I'm Steve. Here's my address. Except that I didn't always say 5, I told people to come at different times. Steve had a steady stream of angry, disappointed visitors that evening from 4 to 10 PM. TL. Doctor, my friend puts fake classifieds online with my number. And I send them all to his address. Once when I was at school, this annoying kid used to sit next to me and copy my work. For a while I let it happen despite being pissed off at the same time. Anyway. One day I was in a particularly bad mood and he was up to his usual tricks. At this point he wasn't even being subtle about it and he just casually reached across and started pulling my sheets of paper closer to him. I snapped and said, just take my FCKing work. I put my hand flat on the sheets of paper and viciously slid them along the desk in his direction. Letting go of them swiftly, air got underneath the paper and they lifted up in the direction of his face. One corner of a sheet of paper flung straight up into his eyeball and I immediately thought, FCK. What have I done? After crying for a bit, he moved his hand away and his eye was bloodshot right next to his iris. To this day his eye still looks the same and I'm ridden with guilt whenever I see him. To this day his eye still looks the same. So when did this happen? Yesterday? My friend's sister saved her used tampons and scattered them around her ex-BF's car after breaking into it one night. So, she left plenty of DNA evidence in case he pressed charges. Years and years ago I had a connection for satellite card programmers. I had friends and such that I would get them for. A friend's dad wanted one. So I got him one. I think they were around $100. I didn't collect money from him right away. Called him a couple times to collect and he decided he wasn't going to pay me because he couldn't figure out how to program his cards. Not really my problem. Called him a few more times. He just flat out refused. Then told me he was going to call the police and let them know I was selling satellite programmers. He had made his money in software so thought he could do whatever he wanted. I hate assholes like that. I was 19 or so and $100 wasn't exactly expendable. So I put brake fluid in spray bottle and completely coated his new Escalade. Never saw my $100. Still hang out with his kid to this day. TL. DR. Don't blame me because you can't program your satellite. There was this jerk that used to make it his personal mission to make my life miserable in school. I was quiet and never really bothered anybody. But for some reason that sort of thing set him off. I got back at him by keeping everyone at arm's length and developing a bitter and cynical view of the world. I spoiled Breaking Bad for my friend because he was being a dick. I'll never forgive myself. Get the poop in the butter guy here. A sap. My ex-GF's neighbor was always accusing her of not picking up after her dog. One day my ex opens her front door. And many piles of dog poo are there on the step, obviously put there by the neighbor. Ex then takes a bucket, puts all of the turds inside, fills the bucket with hot water, and walks to the neighbor's house. When the neighbor answers the door, my ex throws the hot bucket of dog tea water in the lady's face and into her house. My ex was arrested for assault. Edit. Clarity. Sounds like your ex should have picked up after her dog. When I was in the 5th grade there was this chump who always teased me. One day outside of school I ran up to him and kicked him as hard as I could in the balls and I remember hearing him scream as I walked away like a badass. Years later his parents ran into my parents at a restaurant and blamed me for their kid's testicle issues he still has. Years later I kind of feel bad about it. But he was a pig-faced dick.